What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Week 15 edition, the Fantasy Playoffs edition, the Snowmageddon on Saturday games edition. Now we're into this part of the season.
Weather, finally some weather, dude.
The Underworld.
We never haven't had weather since the torrential downpour that Justin Fields was in.
Yes. Maybe we'll get to see some slip and slides like Justin Fields was doing after that monsoon in week 1. But we are here to talk about game stacks. And I kind of, was obviously joking around about the end of the season chaos, weather, different situations. But the big thing for me about this week 15, and we're going to talk about the main slate today. There's lots of content everywhere, including here on RotoGrinders, for the Saturday 3-game slate, which is actually where that weather issue mostly is with the Bills. But with there being still, Thursday night football, Sunday night football, Monday night football, and then taking 3 games, even though there are no buys, and putting them on Saturdays, it gives us only a 10-game main slate on Sunday. And before we went live, Matt was reading off some of the game totals for said 10-game main slate. And it gets thin pretty fast, and you actually have to really consider some of these games that, what we've done on this show all year long is really focusing in on a lot of the more action-packed games. Sunday, we're going to have to pick and choose some spots here that maybe don't feel quite as comfortable as they have all season. Dario, how are you kind of feeling about this slate?
I think for a 10-game slate, this one is actually not bad. We've had some 10-game slates this season where there's maybe 2 games you're kind of interested in. I think last week was one of those weeks. But this week, I think there's at least 3 games, probably 4, that stand out in a pretty positive light. So, there are some real stinkers on this slate for sure. But this one also has, I think, some pretty exciting potential.
Yeah. We're going to be able to play some Buccaneers this week. Right, that's a team we don't normally talk about.
That is true.
What's the last time? I don't even remember the last time I said the name Chris Godwin on this show.
Yeah, it's been a while.
How long has it been since the Mike Evans tumbled from my lips? He is terrible, by the way.
Oh my God,
he is a terrible football player, just awful.
If I have to watch him and Brady not connect on another pat, and they don't even come close. The one this past week was Evans is quasi open on a corner route in the end zone. He was open and Brady hit him in the ankle or something like that. It's they are just obviously there's a lot of things wrong with the Bucs, but Brady Evans is just a disaster connection right now.
Can you imagine that was a big stack of yours in best ball?
Thank God. Thank God Evans was expensive. Thank God.
I know he was expensive enough, so probably not. But yes, that's definitely. There have been seasons in the past where that was something you built around.
Mm-hmm.
Woof.
But I think there's, like Dario said, this slate is kind of exciting, but for weird reasons, right? There isn't any necessarily games to me that jump out as, there's no Chiefs Bills, there's no the Lions Coors Field-esque games that we get sometimes, I always think back to that Lions Seahawks game because that was the big Lions game that just truly blew up and everybody in the whole game went for 40 fantasy points, including TJ Hawkinson, who clearly that one still haunts me. But there are some intriguing games, and in particular, a few intriguing offenses where maybe the other side isn't quite as appealing, which makes this particular show kind of fun to talk through. And let's just go ahead and dive into the first one, which is the most obvious. I guess there's 2 that we could call the most obvious, but I'm going to say this one's the most obvious because there's a little more fight maybe in the other side, and it's Eagles-Bears. And this feels to me like the Eagles game last week, which we also discussed Eagles. We discussed, using some of the value which hit to get things like Jalen Hurts stacks into your lineups. And it feels so similar to me this week where if Fields and co can push back just enough, like Daniel Jones did, right? They got blown out, but they got to 17 points or something like that, just kept Hurts and everybody rolling enough that look what happens. The whole offense went off. Everybody, every key player, Miles Sanders, Devonta Smith, AJ Brown. And so I feel really good about the Eagles doing their thing against this Bears defense. But Dario, are we going to get enough pushback from the Bears, or just how are you kind of feeling about this game?
I think this game, so Chase Claypool was ruled out just before we went live. Didn't have a chance to get that update into the projections because that literally was like 10 minutes before I hopped on the StreamYard here. But that means that like Justin Fields is going to be throwing the ball to guys who would be on the practice squad for any other NFL roster. Cole Kmet is looking very chalky for good reason. He's been getting pretty healthy target shares. And then now he's going to be like by default the only guy for Fields to throw to this week. So I think that it's kind of tricky. I don't know if they're going to be able to push back. I think my hope is that Fields is able to engineer a couple drives with his legs, right? You get a couple scrambles, a long touchdown run maybe, and that's kind of how they're able to generate the offense. So I think another thing to note here is that the Bears defense has just been horrendous the last few weeks. Like they've taken a big step down. They traded away Roquan Smith and Robert Quinn. As we know, they were, kind of turning all their good players into future draft capital. And the result of that is your defense is going to suck. And that's what we're seeing. And the Eagles
it's by measure, the worst defense in the league. It's the best defense to play against for fantasy football. All the points against, fantasy points against, position by position, you go down the board, you want to play the Bears.
Absolutely.
So let's just play the Eagles.
So now you get the offense we always want to play, the best offense against the worst defense. And like I said,
there's no weather, 27 degrees, 10-mile-an-hour winds, no precipitation in the forecast. Wheels up, baby.
I think Fields, Dario, to your point, is just like kind of enough. It's crazy. We wouldn't have said this, in week 3 or something like that. But I think he's just almost like enough of a magician, if you will. And kind of their scheme can lend itself to that as well. Just, you get that guy, right? I'm not going to say he's Lamar or whatever, but how many times has Lamar single-handedly kept his team in games throwing to DeMarcus Robinson and stuff? When you just have that dynamic player, I think Fields can do basically I think they're going to get the doors beat off him, but I think he can do what, Daniel Jones and the Giants did last week. It feels very, very similar to me. And so it just feels like wheels up on the Eagles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, so basically I just pulled up, you guys know Ben Baldwin's website with all the EPA per play, the defensive tiers, offensive tiers. Since week 10, the Bears defense is allowing 1.66 EPA per play. That's the same as a roughly somewhere between Dak Prescott and Jared Goff drop back per play basis. So their entire defense against run and pass is like facing an above average quarterback every single play right now.
That is amazing. So I guess 2 parts to this question then. I think we've established we really like the Eagles here. Pretty much everybody. If you have an Eagles jersey and you're going to get out there onto the field, you probably are in a good spot. My 2-part question, Matt, is who should we focus in on, the Eagles, or how are you thinking about constructing your Eagle stacks? And do you need/want a bring back, right? A Kmet or one of these loser wide receivers or, anything?
Poor Equanimous St. Brown, man.
I mean, yes, if he's the first name that has to come out of your mouth.
Just like
maybe Velus Jones will get his first target in like 6 weeks.
Oh no, it's not Velus Jones. Oh my God, N'Keal Harry, just
N'Keal Harry's
bust of the world. Too. You have Byron Pringle, dust. We have a dust and a bust. So it's dust busters at wide receiver. We'll go dust busters over losers.
Far more kind than I. And then
if I had to pick one, I would pick Equanimous as a guy that he can. They get him involved in the run game a little bit on reverses. He does have a nice target depth, but they also throw some screens to him. Like he's actually a functional wide receiver. So you'd be the one that I would use. But remember, with Justin Fields, we like to do the inverted stacks.
Mm-hmm.
We invented that whole new concept, the inverted stack, where you'd stack Fields with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. We did that because the Eagles were facing, or the Bears were facing, a pocket passer.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just get everything we want, and we'll invert the stack where it's Fields. Yep. I think it was Fields with Waddle and Hill.
Right. Yep.
That worked really well. I mean, that was one of the many concepts we've invented and smashed as usual. However, I have a little concern here. First game back from the injury, 6 attempts after he was averaging 15 attempts prior. So he had 3 weeks with 15 attempts on average. Then he gets injured. Then he comes back, gets a 55-yard run. So he gave the yards, 71 yards, but only on 6 attempts. So I'm not sure. Like, it seems like we would go right back to the well with this Fields, Brown, Smith. It sounds fun, and I think we should do a few of those because they're fun.
Mm-hmm.
But there's really no reason to overthink this, right? It was just we just play Hurts, and you can run it back with some Komet. We're not. Are we running it back with David Montgomery? No, right? There's no one. How could you?
Yeah,
what?
Not against this Eagles front
no,
seven.
What? Like, you're hoping for tons of dump offs? Maybe no.
Yeah, which is not the Bears thing, right?
Yeah,
if it was
that's not
Jared
them with
Goff
Fields
running back or something. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So there's just different scenarios where if it were a pocket passer, we'd probably do more Fields, maybe talk yourself into a little dabble on David Montgomery. But because the way it's structured, I think you say once again, Jalen Hurts stacks will lead the way. We've got these 2 receivers we care about, and that's it. And then, you go on to the next game. I don't really know what else to do.
I was going to ask, last week I stumbled myself upon because I was doing a lot of the roster construction that we talked about here on this show and still wanted to get Eagles. I actually wasn't on my main team playing an Eagles stack, but I still wanted to get my Eagles exposure, and I played Miles Sanders, which worked out quite well. So I wanted to ask about him last week it would have worked. You onslaughted the Eagles, everybody, right? Brought everybody along for the ride. They score 50 points, you win. Can we do stuff like that this week? I mean, this is arguably the best offense against the worst defense. They're going to score as many points as they want. Or do you want to look to maybe some Miles Sanders in lieu of the passing game? And then the last one I wanted to ask about Dallas Goedert, assuming he's back. We haven't officially got that confirmation. How much, if any, Goddard would you be interested in playing? Just all the Eagles. All the Eagles.
Yeah.
We're interested in all of them.
We've talked about this. First game back for these guys, man. I'm not that into it. You got to. It's kind of kicking and screaming with the first game back with these guys. It really depends on how chalky Cole Kmet is. How chalky do you think he's going to be, Dario?
I think the ownership projections had him pretty high up as the top tight end on Fanduel, 10% for the third highest tight end on DraftKings. So I guess a little bit more so on Fanduel. I think he's kind of he's the primary Bears weapon that people are going to play as a run back in this game.
I think that
is what happens.
I think maybe even more so than his raw ownership. I think on DraftKings we have him 4th. I think that might move up a little bit because that doesn't factor in what Dario said about Claypool being out. But like Chigo Okonkwo, I think will be more higher owned on DraftKings, specifically at 3,100. He's the shiny new toy. People want to play Chargers against the Titans and him. But Kmet's ownership in Eagles stacks, I think will be kind of outsized, right? You play your Hurts double, and Kmet fits this perfect bring back. And so it's like, well, in that case, I don't want to play him on those teams because that's what everybody's going to play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I mean, I think St. Brown had 86 air yards last week.
I don't hate him. What about, can we cipher through? Look, this is what our specialty. This is what we show up for this show for. Talk about Khalif Raymond.
We're going to play some St. Brown, fellas.
Khalif Raymond and all these guys we spend 20 minutes talking about.
St. Brown's athletic. St. Brown, his body is not a football body, right? 6'5" wide receivers rarely work out, right? Unless you have Calvin Johnson level athleticism, you're going to be struggling. You're just going to get bodied too much. Your center of gravity is too high. But if there's nobody else, I mean,
Dante Pettis, I assume I'm just looking at snaps from last week. So Claypool played 63% of the snaps. Pettis played 65. ESB played 58. Byron Pringle played 38. So I would assume that we'll get the 3 wide receiver set of Pettis, ESB, and Pringle now that Claypool is out. Maybe Harry is questionable, as Dario said. So I would guess it'd be those three. Maybe a trick play to veil us once or something. But those three guys out there most of the time.
St. Brown's my guy. I'm putting my chips in St. Brown. I'm going to do some St. Brown run back. And I agree with you on Miles Sanders. It's not like we don't even have a 50-point game total on the slate. So that's when you're onslaughting games, right? You got to think, well, what am I missing out on, right? You're not missing out on much by onslaughting this game. So go for it.
It's interesting to me, Dario, and then I'll kick it back over to you. But it's also interesting to me that Miles Sanders his price hasn't really drastically gone up either. I mean, he just scored 30 fantasy points, is in basically the best matchup of any running back on the slate, right? If people treat the Lions like we should treat the Bears, like the Lions is still a great fantasy scoring environment, but it's not actually because the defense is Bears level bad. It's bad, right? But it's because the Lions also put up a bunch of points. Miles could just run straight through these guys. He's only at 6,500 on DraftKings, 7,800 on Fanduel, and his ownership isn't coming up. So I think he makes for a pretty intriguing tournament play yet again, just like last week.
Absolutely. I think his ownership was surprisingly low to me when you consider, I think what's happening is everyone's stacking Hurts. Hurts is the number one projected ownership quarterback. So people don't really want to play Sanders with Hurts. And maybe that's suppressing Sanders' ownership a little bit. But yeah, it's like I see him around 9% on DraftKings, around 11% on FanDuel, which I think is a pretty enticing spot for him to be in.
Yeah, he's getting 3 targets in a lot of games. It's not 0 targets, right? I know he struggled. He doesn't even have a breakaway run yet in the passing game. He will, right? He's gonna break a long run in the as a receiver at some point. He doesn't.
He has 2 in the run game last week.
Yeah, he has all these in the run game. He's just not doing it in the passing game. That's going to be great for Hurts. I know that Hurts is chalky, Kmet's chalky. I get it. We're like, we're all sort of just covered in chalk dust right now. I get what's happening. It's a little bit of like, okay, guys, any new information? Well, it's hard. It's hard to look past this. I don't want to look past it. I'm not going to look past it. 85 receiving yards for Miles Sanders so far this season. That's really probably what's driving people away from him, is that he's just been such a zero. But when you look at the targets, yes, the target share hasn't been that great either, but at least he's getting 2-3 a game the last 3 weeks.
And most of the season, there was a little clip here, but also you could
Gainwell last week at all. Did I see Gainwell at all?
Very little. I can look up his
very little Gainwell. So
Boston Scott hammered in a late touchdown, didn't he?
Yes.
Yeah, but I didn't see much Gainwell. So I mean, and the snap share is going up for Sanders. I know that
Gainwell played 12 snaps.
Yeah, so there's some snap cannibalization happening, and running a few more routes where, hey, we're gonna look up. There's gonna be like a 4 or 5 target game coming soon for Sanders. And that's the story we tell ourselves. We're going to play some Hurts, but here's how you get unique. There's not a lot of Hurts Sanders, because by the numbers right now, absolutely negative correlation with those two guys. No question. I get it. But knowing that, you have to start doing some contrarian moves, right? It's almost some self-sabotage if you want to get unique with this game.
Yeah, I think like I'll probably end up playing some lineups that are Fields, Sanders, and then one of Smith or AJ Brown. So you get 2 Eagles, hope that Fields outscores Hurts because he's forced to use his legs a little more. And maybe Sanders is like, Hurts only throws for 2 touchdowns and Sanders gets another 2, some scenario like that. And you save, $1,000 and a lot of ownership by pivoting to Fields in the same game. And then possibly just like doing naked Fields. I mean, we've seen it work before. And I think that like is probably my, like, if I'm trying to get unique, the way I would approach this game.
I think I really like that. And I think that the more we talk this through, the Miles Sanders thing feels like a slightly unique version of like what we saw with Josh Jacobs when Matt said like the snap cannibalization is happening and these things. It was like Josh Jacobs still in super long down and distance and stuff. Amir Abdullah will come in, right? And that's kind of what we saw. Like Amir Abdullah will get his 12 snaps like we saw with Gainwell, right? Zamir will get 2 carries, Boston Scott comes in and gets his couple carries, assuming a normal game script. Obviously, when it got out of hand last week, it was different. But Miles has kind of taken over this. Now, he's not going to get the amount of checkdowns because Hurts doesn't check it down like a Derek Carr does or something. But he's kind of like taken over, to me, all the most important work in this offense.
Oh, yeah.
Outside of maybe like the 2-minute drill or something. And no one's like caring, even though it's the best offense in arguably the best offense in the NFL. So
and a very run-heavy offense at that.
Yeah. Yeah.
When we talk about the best offenses, you think of, pass-heavy offenses like the Chiefs and the Bills, but this is a team that moves the ball really efficiently just by pounding you on the ground. So I think that and Hurts really adds to Sanders' efficiency. It's not like you have a Derrick Henry situation where he could have a game with 3.1 yards per carry. I mean, Sanders is averaging 5 yards a carry on the year because of the threat of Jalen Hurts on the ground.
Don't go Alfred Morris corollary on me, Dario. You get me a little. I'm starting to sweat a little bit.
It feels like that though.
It is. It's a true thing. No. It's a true fact. Last 6 weeks, 16 red zone carries for Miles Sanders.
He could have had bigger games. I've watched him get, as a person heavily invested in him in best ball. He's very important for my my bank account these next 3 weeks.
Hey, nice, good for you, man. I fell for the Gainwell T-shirt.
I have a lot of Gainwell.
I fell for the Gainwell T-shirt. I guilty.
Yeah, I was just in on the Eagles and luckily got onto a lot of Miles Sanders, so that is helping. And so maybe there's a little bias in this Miles Sanders take, but I really do think everything we're seeing, you guys have outlined it perfectly, is kind of leaning into him. I think you can build. I like the Fields, Miles with one of the wide receivers. I think you can just like onslaught the Eagles and use your ES, right? How do you get Hurts, AJB, Miles? If you want to really go crazy and put Devonta in there, especially if Goddard doesn't play, then you can just really load up, use your ESB to get your salary savings to get those guys. I just think that
ESB is also the only guy. I hate to say it. I don't think I've ever used this phrase before. ESB is the only eye test guy in this receiving core.
That is true.
I mean, he's the only guy that gets the ball in the passing game, and I'm like, oh, this is exciting. This looks good. This guy looks like he has a clue out there. This is fun.
Please don't mention Dante Pettis, Dario. Remember how many years ago was it that Pettis was on the 49ers and he was Brandon Ayuk before Brandon Ayuk, except not good.
It was like 2016 maybe.
He got doghoused or whatever. He was like the breakout wide receiver pick on the dusty 49ers and he just bent. He didn't even play. He's like Alberto. He's the wide receiver Alberto, basically. I want to move on to the next game, and I think we should talk about a game that feels similar to this one in terms of the expected game script and high-powered offense against quite terrible team on the other side, and then we can start to get into the ones where we might actually get a little bit of pushback each side. Chiefs Texans is the other one that feels very, very similar to me to Eagles Bears. However, with the Chiefs, I'm definitely going to need you guys to tell me who besides Travis Kelce we can play on the Chiefs, because they should score as many points as they want to score. Patrick Mahomes is awesome. I could be talked into a lot of guys here on the Chiefs side. So Dario, start to help me out with the Chiefs, and then we'll go dumpster diving eventually on all these what I'm not allowed to call them losers. I'll come up with a new these castaways. Castaways on the.
It was just when you said it. I don't know why. I just thought it was so funny. It was like,
yeah, I think that this is a game like. Everything's lining up perfectly for Isaiah Pacheco. Like we've talked about him week in, week out, it feels like, and he's had promising usage, but not really had a monster signature game yet this season.
It's coming.
And I think against the Texans, who have the worst run defense in the league, it just feels like this is going to be the spot for Pacheco. And I think that Kadarius Toney is a possible return this week, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. Sounds like Mecole Hardman, they're leaning toward having him sit one more week. So that's at least one thing that's a little clearer. But I think even with Toney, you probably want to limit your pass catcher exposure to like Juju, Kelsey, and then a little bit of Toney, a little bit of MVS. I think when Toney and Hardman were out, you can roll the dice on Justin Watson or Sky Moore. But I think with Toney back, it's kind of those three receivers with Toney, MVS, Juju, and then Kelsey.
You know, I can already read all the best ball articles for Kadarius Toney in 2023 comparing him to Curtis Samuel. It's like they write themselves. Right? They're already written, guys. AI bots have already wrote. Don't even bother writing them. They're already written. Okay. You don't need to write them. I'm also not going to pay attention to them because it's not correct. It's not the same player. Kadarius Toney's never going to happen. Pacheco is, though. Pacheco is. I have the most fraudulent stat of the year. If you guys want it. You guys want it?
Yes.
Hit me with it.
Isaiah Pacheco has increased his total receptions on a per game basis for the last 4 weeks.
Oh, that is very, very true. Look at this.
That's right. For the last 4 weeks, Pacheco has increased his targets and his receptions each and every week. It went from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3.
Pencil in Pacheco, 4 targets, 4 receptions.
If he doesn't have 4. If he doesn't have 4 targets and 4 catches, I mean, I will eat my hat. Okay,
this is the logic.
I've never seen something more certain. You know, in the history of
this is advanced numbers.
This is inside DFS.
I mean, this is really analytical stuff you're getting from us over here at Player Profiler. Though it is interesting. Right, that he is getting a little bit more incrementally used in the passing game. It's a fraudulent stat, but it's nothing.
I mean, just a little bit of it, like you said. I think when you take it in the whole picture and you say they're clearly just trusting him more. However, you want to break that down in specific analytics. I'm not sure the step ladder target.
Man, in the Super Bowl, Isaiah Pacheco is going to get like 9 targets.
How many weeks away is the Super Bowl? Yeah.
Maybe like
that
11.
Took me a second, Dario. That took me a second. And then once it hit, man, it was so good. It felt so good once it hit.
We're going to have to do a Super Bowl show, and we're going to be jamming Pacheco captain because he
that's
continues.
Content, people.
That is good. But I mean, I do think, to be serious, Pacheco feels like this dollar store version of the Miles Sanders conversation we just had, continuing to earn a little bit more and a little bit more. Now, McKinnon is certainly a lot more of a thorn in the side than Gainwell, but they also don't have a Boston Scott. So it's kind of like you're giving up some of that Boston Scott risk, randomly siphoning off a touchdown to give away some of the pass game work and stuff that McKinnon is getting. But in this game, unless Mahomes does his crazy, pulls off another, pulls a rabbit out of a hat on a scramble where he throws the ball over his head to McKinnon for a long touchdown. Theoretically, it lines up a lot more for Pacheco this week. So, I mean, I think he makes a lot of sense in tournaments. Is he, Matt, would he be your favorite Chief, though, to play? Or are you still leaning?
Yes, this is a slap your forehead game for Pacheco. It's a slap your forehead game all the way. It's going to be 6 o'clock, and everyone's going to be like, "How did we not have more Pacheco?" I mean, wasn't it obvious? Yes, it was obvious. Why didn't you? Well, it's Pacheco. I don't know. 7th round pick. Hasn't done it before. All those things, right? This is everything, man. I mean, I can so in my head envision like watching the Red Zone channel and then flashing, right? And Scott Hansen, and you could just see Pacheco running down the sideline, right? And they're just flashing to a Chiefs game because they weren't in the red zone at the time, but then quickly flashing to a Chiefs game where there goes Pacheco. And everyone's like, oh, that's of course. Of course. He runs a 4.37. The guy's really explosive. He just hasn't had a big, long, hairy touchdown run yet. It's a great gift that he hasn't done it yet. Had he done it once this year, everyone would be like, "Oh, well, we're going to get 2 of those this week."
Yeah, he would be 6,700 and more popular, right?
We haven't funny how that it works. Yet. There's been it's been so tantalizing, so close, right? He's not the best, like, fundamentally sound runner. I know that.
No, he runs like a crazy person.
Yeah, he doesn't look under control out there. Right? He looks like he's just learning the position, but like, isn't that like exactly what we're looking for here? Isn't that exactly what the aesthetics aren't quite right. The game log watchers are like, this guy's an RB17. It's so perfect. It's why we have player profiler. Like, no, guys, no. They give up the most fantasy points to opposing running backs in the running game, not in the passing game. That's why we break it down. It's very important. We have a next game block on player profile. We break it down. Defensive matchup by rush versus receiving for running backs. And Houston is number 1 in fantasy points against on the ground. And they're actually above average in terms of their defense against receiving backs. So this isn't the week to play McKinnon. It's a bad week for McKinnon. It's the week for Pacheco.
Mm-hmm. So I do think
I'm just not overthinking it. Why would I?
I agree with you. I'm more intrigued now. Maybe the greatest quarterback of all time is not someone I really want to like stick my neck out and say no. You can't play him.
Oh, you're playing him.
Patrick Mahomes can bury you at any point, but I think if we're racking and stacking the Chiefs side of things, like in comparison to the Eagles game, I think I would be on more Pacheco and more Hurts than Mahomes. Out of 150. Mm-hmm. If I were deciding between the premium stacks, right, I would lean more into Hurts and less into Mahomes. Again,
if you're talking about total shares out of 150, you're going to have more Hurts and Pacheco than Mahomes, but you're certainly going to have Mahomes.
Yeah,
I mean, we want Mahomes. I mean, the nice thing about Mahomes is that the Houston doesn't give up a lot of. There's so the game script is just so positive when you face the Texans. The quarterbacks don't need to drop back much, so they don't actually score that many fantasy points against Houston. That's a factor here. Like, we're going to look up. It's going to be Mahomes, like 260 yards, 2 touchdowns, and good, great, cool.
And what I want to talk about now, people have some good questions. I have some questions about the Texans side of things. Is what we saw last week with them. Now, one could easily argue that was the most obvious situation of the Cowboys being the Cowboys and just letting the Texans, nearly beat them for some unbelievable reason. But if they can, do like what we talked about with the Giants last week against the Eagles and the Bears this week against the Eagles, and if they could do what they did against the Cowboys this week, I'm not saying they need to be beating the Chiefs, but pushing them, right? Scoring points. They scored a bunch of points last week against the Cowboys. If that happens, then your Mahomes stacks are like, oh, okay, now I don't have any Patrick Mahomes and the Texans are up 14-3, or whatever. Am I expecting that? Of course not. But I do think clearly there are Texans here that are going to get played in tournaments. Damian Pierce is out. Brandon Cooks and Nico Collins are out again. So there's theoretical value here. But Dario, is there, was this a smokescreen last week? How do you feel about all this with these Texans?
I just think that, Chris Moore, it's funny because I know you and I talked about Chris Moore weeks ago, Eric, and we were on him before anyone else knew. And then that last week was when he finally broke out in a big way. But I just think at 23% ownership, you're just taking on way too much risk.
No.
For
what?
No.
Shut.
He's the second highest projected player.
Can you? I feel like this is every other weekend on this show. You guys do this to me. It's like a slap in the face. I'm like insulted. What?
Yeah, Chris Moore was cute when it was 0.5% ownership.
Oh my God!
But this is extreme. I think that. I'm surprised
these people are just asking for just Philip Dorsett down their throat.
where's Burkhead's ownership? Because I would have thought that he'd be the chalk pivot.
He's only, what is he, like less than 5K on DraftKings, isn't he?
What the hell?
Burkhead's way down here.
Burkhead is 0.5%.
4,600, and he's 0.5% owned. Yeah, I want to hear what you guys are thinking about that backfield, though. Burkhead, Dare, are they going to bring Jared Dokes up or what?
Goombawale catches passes. That's the issue. Is if Burkhead's going to go into the Dameon Pierce role, that's a pretty shitty role for fantasy.
Yes.
I mean, I think that Burkhead has he's established himself as a pass catching back this year, but he hasn't had a game with more than 2 targets since week 7. So he kind of got phased out as the team started trusting Pierce more in the passing game.
Right.
And I think that all the change ups at quarterback, I don't think Kyle Allen was throwing as much to the running backs in general. Like Davis Mills was a big dump off guy. Rex Burkhead and Dameon Pierce both had healthy target shares for a little stretch there. And then, I mean, Burkhead hasn't seen more than 25% of snaps since also week 7. So he's kind of just been getting phased out in favor of Pierce for a little while now. That definitely complicates things, but I think that for 4.6K in a game where he has the proven pass catching chops and we know they're going to be playing from behind. I think that, I thought he was going to be chalk. Like when I was doing, looking at lineups early in the week, the salaries, he seemed like an obvious value should Pierce miss the game. And I think at 0.5%, that's like kind of that makes him my easy run back on the Texans for sure.
Easy money. We're always looking for value, right? Didn't we talk about this? RB2, whatever.
Yep.
Right. It's RB2, whatever, man. Whatever you want to do at RB. I don't care. Whatever you want to do at RB2, whatever.
It's like when you're drafting your best ball teams, you get one running back in the first 2 rounds, and then don't even think about RB2 until round 10.
Don't ask me on Friday what we're doing. Ask me Sunday morning what we're doing with RB2, and I'll tell you. Right? And we'll figure it out, and it's going to be a crusty friggin' who cares?
Last week that could have led you to stumble upon Jerick McKinnon for all you know.
Yes, whatever. Yes.
J.K. Dobbins.
It's going to happen. Like, what if they start Goombawale or something, and they announce him as a star? I don't know what's going to happen. Probably going to announce Burkhead, though. Why not? They're probably when he's announced the starter, he's going to get 15 touches, and you're going to want to play him. It's that easy. It's that simple.
I do think the concern is just, would any of these guys really take on a true meaningful role? I do agree that the price and as a run back option, particularly with honestly both of the 2 guys having pass catching chops, it makes it a lot more comfortable than say when we used to talk about Pierce at like 6,200 with potential to get scripted out. Right. Those were issues. So it's much better now, but I do think
that's a name. That's a name, Eric. Have we used the name Dameon Pierce in the show? Like, you think about
and he's always chalk. He's always chalk.
I know, but think about it. I'm not trying to like sell. This isn't a commercial for this show. Okay. I'm not trying to do a commercial, but okay. There are certain teams that don't show up in our analysis very often. And there are certain players within that subset of teams that just don't show up for the variety of reasons, because we don't talk about their team. We don't talk about types of players that they are. Just so happens that we've recommended Dameon Pierce absolutely never. And was anyone kicking themselves? Oh, damn it. I wish I'd played Pierce. Maybe once, but that was before anyone was really playing him.
Right.
So, you're welcome.
No, I do agree. I did just want to touch on, I think that the running back position is just maybe a smidge trickier than, like, I'm definitely not saying don't play Burkhead, but I think it feels comfy because, like, we've seen Burkhead do it before, right? He has had that passing down role before. He did get outsnapped somewhat handily by Dare last week. They did have Eno play some snaps too. I just feel like it could be like
Eno's out of the 40%, picture though. He got claimed by the Saints
because apparently he's the world's biggest asshole that lives. Like,
why don't they? I met Eno Benjamin at the Senior Bowl. Fantastic fella.
Is he? Yeah, well, he was
a nice guy. I think he's become embittered by the league. He had a bad attitude. I think you have a bad attitude, and you know what, buddy? Like, hey, we're gonna get Dokes or Freeman in here. Freeman.
I think Royce Freeman is a threat to steal carries. I have him projected for a little bit of a role.
I think the Royce Freeman is a more likely candidate to get called up than Jared Dokes.
Yeah.
So that's just my fear that they're going to bring up. If they bring up Freeman, it's going to get very muddled. You're right. But you're going to do some Burkhead run back. You are going to do that. It's not the craziest thing. 5 catches for 30 yards is 8 points right there. So,
yeah, it's funny because Burkhead just has those games on his resume where he'll come in, be a starter for a team out of pure desperation. I mean, looking at 28 points and 2 touchdowns week 16 last year. I feel like he does this every year. He comes in
every
with a 20-plus point
performance
in the end of the season.
Just hammering home touchdowns. Yes. And then Dameon Pierce was like, where was this carry when I wanted it?
Add this to our Pacheco analysis of, every week he gains another target. Every year, Rex Burkhead has a big game at the end of the season. So this one, this has got to be.
This is not Pacheco level slap your forehead. This is like, hey, this is a thing that could maybe happen. So dabble, but don't be.
He definitely has the upside, right? He clearly has and not even just because of what years past. I mean, if he's going to right, Dameon Pierce would have had the upside if he didn't lose all these valuable pass catching, opportunities when the team would fall behind. Well, if you give that to a guy, plus you give him the goal line work and, some of this inefficient work, well, now he does have the upside, especially at 4,600. It's just, there's also scenarios in which it's like 30% to you, right? It's Oprah. You get a carry, you get a carry, you get a carry. And, we don't really care about any of them. If we don't care about any of them, though, I really don't want to talk about Mega Chalk Chris Moore, but can we leverage off of Chris Moore at all with any of these other guys? Amari Rodgers popped up for it's a Packers castaway wide receiver slate. Let's play Amari Rodgers and ESB, but can we play Dorsett or Amari Rodgers if we're not playing a Chalk Chris Moore?
I think you might as well play Dorsett. He's running all the routes. Like one week could be Chris Moore, the next week could be Dorsett. Like,
thank you.
I think it's just as reasonable. He's run, 92% of the routes last week, 75 the week before. He didn't really get the looks last week, but he had Trayvon Diggs on him. So this week, maybe the Chiefs say, oh, Chris Moore's your best receiver. And then that opens things up for Dorsett. I don't know. I just think that with the way that the 23% is absurd for.
He ran a 4.28 at his pro day, fellas. The guy has deep speed. That's what you're looking for at value. Coming in at 3.3K on DraftKings, 5.3K on Fanduel. This is the run back, fellas. Ownership's going to be like 2%. This is it. He breaks free for a long touchdown. He puts up 3 for 101 and a touch. Got to get to that bonus, Eric.
I think tell that to
please,
DJ Chark.
Don't chark us.
Yeah, please.
Don't chark us around.
I can't do any more 99 yards on unknown players.
Yeah, get to that 100 yards.
I do think, Dario, remember when we finally got the Foster Moreau week, we spent that Friday talking about like, okay, look, everybody has, it's not quite the same thing because it's not like people were playing Dorsett frequently, but everybody had given up on Foster Moreau. And you said it perfectly. It's like, nothing has changed. He's still getting targets. He runs every single route. He's out there. The matchup's good, blah, blah, blah. It's going to come. And like Philip Dorsett feels like, a crappier but wide receiver version of that to me. It's like everybody's focusing in. I think people will actually play Amari Rodgers because he produced last week, despite the fact that he really didn't. He ran half the routes or so. And so it's like people are just going to gravitate to the guys who did it last week. But the difference between Chris Moore and Philip Dorsett is, okay, maybe Chris Moore's a little bit better, right? Should project a little bit better. But I think we're really focusing in on the fact that he drew all those targets last week, when in reality, there's nothing in Chris Moore's history to say he earns that many more targets than Philip Dorsett does. So it just feels like that type of a situation. Let's play the guy that is doing the same thing as Chris Moore, basically, but it just has, the ball hasn't bounced his way quite the same.
Totally. Yeah.
And in some ways, Dorsett has some similarities to Pacheco in that way as well.
Yeah.
So that's where, 5.9K on DraftKings for Pacheco, 3.3 for Dorsett, right? You're spending less than 10K on 2 players. That's incredible value. That's a skinny stack of a game with one of the highest totals. for two players that could get some, score 3 touchdowns between them.
Mm-hmm. And like on your guys' point projections, it looks like there's about a 5-point gap between Moore and Dorsett. I have them a lot closer together on our projections at Player Profiler. It's more like a 2.5 point gap. So I think that
I think that sounds a little bit closer to me.
I don't think that I'm not going to take a 1-game sample from Chris Moore as like, this guy's a hidden gem they just unlocked. He's been a target volume king this entire season, just waiting in the wings. I don't think that's the case. I mean, we've seen 10 target games from Nico Collins week in and week out. So I think that this Texans offense is just kind of, they're just waiting for the draft to roll around. Let's be honest.
Yes, 100%.
But in the worst way, playing all these 30-year-olds.
Yeah, why can't?
What
Brevin
are you
Jordan
doing
get on the field? Why can't Brevin Jordan get on the field? Can someone explain this to me?
Play your rookies.
I don't get this. I don't get it.
The NFL, man. Don't even get me started.
Yeah, they're gonna roll out Royce Freeman and
don't
Rex
get me
Burkhead
started
at running back, and their receiving room is like old, like literally, really. Chris Moore's 29, Dorsett's 29. Like, what are we doing here? Anyway, let's move on from those unfortunate fellas there on the Texans. We talked about them enough. Let's talk about a game that's a lot more fun to actually play both sides on, and you don't have to play a chalky Chris Moore or talk yourself into Philip Dorsett or anything like that.
I don't need to be talking to Dorsett.
Cowboy, yeah, well, you're gonna be playing 150 ESB and Philip Dorsett
way out ahead on Dorsett.
It's like you can afford your Eagles super stack with Jamar Chase if you just play nobodies in the rest of your lineup.
This is what I'm talking about.
This season is so stupid. Cowboys Jags though is a lot more fun. Kind of on both sides, game environment, all that. A little bit more of a typical game we like to talk about here, where we kind of expect a little bit more fireworks on both sides, some pushback. But it's interesting because I find myself naturally kind of gravitating to Dak Prescott stacks here. I think that the field will be a little bit more interested in the other side with Trevor Lawrence, because he's been the guy kind of ripping it up, and he's still cheap. Whereas Dak has not been awesome fantasy wise. He's 15, 17, 20, whatever, a high game of 26. But if you go look at those games, they're scoring a ton of points and they're playing really efficiently on offense, especially since Gallup has been back. It's just damn Zeke and Pollard score every one of the touchdowns. And the moment that flips, I mean, Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, Dalton Schultz, all at reasonable prices and reasonable ownership, I think is something I'm interested in. I know we're showing here as Dak being a little higher owned, and he will be on DraftKings, but like FanDuel at 7,500, just feels like a smash to me. I don't know what you guys think about the Cowboys.
Yeah, I'm surprised that Tony Pollard's ownership isn't any higher. I mean, I know that his price just keeps going up because he keeps crushing.
Is that a recording from every week that you're saying right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Like it's shocking to me that he's only projected for 6% on DraftKings, and I mean 2% on FanDuel makes sense because he's like really priced up on FanDuel.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would have expected him to be in the like 15% range, and I was ready to say, okay, instead of Pollard at 15%, play Zeke at 3% now that Zeke is cheaper. But I mean, they're both kind of low owned. I mean, Zeke even more so. I think that, going into the week, I was looking at Zeke and just saying, he's gotten cheaper now. He's still getting the goal line touches. He's still got a pretty decent role. But I mean, the fact that Pollard isn't even as chalky as he should be just makes me say, like, keep playing both of those guys. But I think you're right in looking to Dak too. Like this Cowboys offense, like you said, has just been hyper efficient these last few weeks.
Why not?
What's your favorite?
Every week we talk about this. We're overweight on Dak and underweight on Trevor Lawrence. That's every week on this show, right? Dak's back, baby. Let's go.
He looks good.
He looks great. He looks great. You have all these options. It's dealer's choice. You can go Lamb. You want to pay up for the premium option. You've got your discount outside sort of fake X in Gallup. You've got your target hog in tight end in Schultz. You've got your pass catching running back in Pollard, where there's not actually the negative correlation that you're getting with like a Zeke. I mean, dealer's choice, but that's why you end up being so far out ahead on ownership with Dak, because you have just a lot of different options, a lot of different combinations you can play.
Definitely. Do you guys have a preference of a Cowboy? And then Dario, what do you think about the Jag side? Because Christian Kirk has just never really been a guy at the prices he's gotten to after he's really kind of exploded. And then he always gets ownership too. He becomes a little bit of a tricky click for me sometimes. Not that he's bad. Zay, if Zay's getting ownership, it's always like kind of a no for me. We talked about him in
it's funny.
Past couple of weeks.
The Zay train is always like high ownership sucks, does well on low ownership, and then
it's amazing.
Like,
we've aced the Zay test. You know,
so
there's nowhere else. If I had to give like a resume for this show, I'd be like Zay Jones. Every week we get it right.
I think that 11% not as bad as the week that we were looking at like 20+% Zay Jones.
That was the hard fade. That was like a Chris Moore situation where it's like, hey guys, I'm fine getting beat by this guy. You check my ownership at 0, please, on this guy. It's Chris Moore. Please write down a 0. Thank you.
This is literally the Chris Moore, like career high targets, career game, right? 11 catches for 145 for Zay, and everybody says, "Oh, now it's the Lions. Got to play him. Got to play Chris Moore on the bring back right to the Chiefs." He had the big game, and then 2 for 16 the next week. That's just what it feels like. And that's what I feel about Zay this week as well. Not just because he had a big game again last week, but this is a tougher spot, right? He's an inconsistent player. This is not the world's best spot. His price is like fine, but not great. Like, honestly, I've been joking about ESB and the kind of scrubby wide receivers we've been talking about. I would much rather punt with one of those guys than play Zay at his ownership. I think, even though like it's fine, like I'm 12% or whatever, but I'm just not excited about it. I'm struggling with the Jaguars because I'm not excited about it. I'm not excited about anybody.
How can you get excited? It's hard to get excited. We're very much in a sort of a one-sided stacking week.
I mean, last week, Evan Ingram, we kind of have to talk about that, right? I mean, 160 yards, 2 touchdowns, I believe was the stat line.
He went full Hawkinson on us.
Yeah.
God damn it.
Yeah. He went full, but by the answer to your question, Eric, the answer is Michael Gallup. So Michael Gallup has not been this cheap in my memory since maybe his second year in the league. It's been forever. 4.5K is as cheap as I've ever seen him, at least this year.
Yeah.
And then last year, I mean, we before the ACL tear, he was more expensive than that. So it's like, not, you're getting great value against the Jaguars. The targets are there, 7 targets a game. He's getting incrementally more confident in the knee as the weeks go on. We're going to look up one of these weeks and, what is it? 8 weeks into the season, post ACL recovery, the guy has one of these monster 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. And that's going to be like, well, yeah, that makes sense. We're X weeks in from the ACL recovery and he's finally fully confident and he played the Jaguars. It all lines up. And we just so happen to run into the lowest salary of the year for him. So I think it just makes too much sense. And because this isn't a go-to game for people, then, and he's Michael Gallup, like he's about to be 27 years old and everyone's over him. His ownership is hovering around 2.5%. Everything is lining up for me with Michael Gallup this week. Not a guy we love to play. Not a guy but this would be the week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned this last week. I played him last week. I think he's been getting targets, at least 6 targets in 5 of the last 6 games. A lot of air yards, 71 air yards, 135, 76, 98. This is just like the nature of Michael Gallup. He had the 2 touchdown game on a Sunday night, of course, so none of us got to play him on a main slate that week.
That's kind of good. He hasn't really been a factor on the main slate.
Yeah.
It's a main slate breakout for Mr. Michael Gallup. I feel like this is like one of those people that Eric has a star next to him. This feels
Michael Gallup.
feels like a very Erik pick.
100%. This feels he feels you said it earlier. He feels Charkian to me.
Oh, very.
Right. It's the same arc that Chark took. Get back on the field. Right. That's step one. Get back on the field, start running all the routes, then start to get a little comfortable. And now you're getting the air yards, right? It hasn't popped in the
Jaguars.
And and you get this amazing matchup. It's like that's what happened with DJ Chark, and then poof, Vikings game, right?
Trayvon Campbell or whoever the hell.
Yeah, and I think that we've seen Trevor Lawrence take some big steps forward the last few weeks, so I do feel more confident about the Jaguars pushing the Cowboys back in this game.
Definitely.
Than if this game were in like week 3 of this year when the Jaguars were looking. I mean, the Jaguars actually looked really good in week 3, but for a while there they were kind of lost. And so I think that's a factor here too. But like Matt said, I think that it's tough to. I think we don't want to exactly chase the last week's result for Lawrence either. I think that the Cowboys defense is a very different beast than I think it was the Titans. Like the Titans pass defense is a joke that he shredded last week, which I think that's. But yeah, in summary, I think you can be hopeful that Trevor Lawrence can at least put up more of a fight than we might have expected.
I don't mind point chase on Evan Ingram though.
I was just gonna say he's kind of
sign me up to point chase Evan Ingram.
He's 3%. It's point chasing when everyone else is point chasing, right? Zay Jones, it's his teammate. When you point chase just to point chase, and all of our opponents are doing it, it's like, well, that's the easiest call not to do it.
Exactly.
But no one is doing this. Tight end as usual. I mean, Chig. I like Chig. Okay, I like Chig Okonkwo just fine. But that's the highest tight end on the slate.
Well, that's point chasing.
Right.
Well, that is point chasing.
And Chig, I mean, like, again, also like Chig, but he's still running less routes than Austin Hooper. Like, he's a Jonnu Smith.
Yeah.
But the shiny toys are so easy to spot. It's like,
and so
down the road, I can see it.
Ingram then makes this bring back
easy.
That, like, who's to say? I know the matchup, right? No one is expecting 15. I don't need 42 points to win with Evan Ingram. You know what I mean?
18,
he had 14
20.
the week before. He's had 18. He's had 15. He's had 12. He's had 13. It's like, do that. And
he's still dirt cheap. Yeah.
We're getting him we're getting the 18. That's our goal. Give us the 18, buddy. You do that. Yep. He does that a few times every year.
Yeah. So I like the Dak, like Dak, CD, Gallup, Ingram. I really like in this game a lot as a
if you want to take Lamb out of there, I like Dak, Gallup, Pollard, Ingram.
I think that's fine too. Yep,
that's a great one. Just because
running back Schultz has been. I mean, I think Dak Prescott just loves Dalton Schultz. I mean, it's funny the difference in Dalton Schultz stat lines. I know he was like dealing with an injury too, but the amount of times the looks that he gets from Dak Prescott compared to like when Cooper Rush was playing is night and day. Like Dak Prescott just loves throwing to Dalton Schultz underneath.
I think these are probably my two favorite tight ends on the slate, cost adjusted. Obviously, Travis Kelce is everyone's favorite tight end every week. But I think, and Schultz is picking up a little bit more ownership. That's kind of why I was like, okay, well, if I like Ingram almost about the same, and I like we like Gallup and such, I think you can leverage the field a smidge with the Ingram side of things. But I mean, I'm not writing off Dalton Schultz. I would be playing Dalton Schultz as well in stacks, not in stacks, whatever. I think he's one of the best. The ownership's coming in too, but I think he's one of the best tight end plays on the slate. All right, we do have a couple more games we wanted to hit. Let's do Chargers Titans, because I don't want to spend that much time talking about the Bucs. Sorry, Matt.
No, I don't either. I just that they're even on the agenda was something.
The Chargers, Titans being on the agenda is kind of fascinating too. But Chargers Titans is really fun because we have this Titans defense that Dario just outlined, particularly their pass defense. They do this stupid old school scheme like the Bucs did. Let's stop the run, and then we're going to be susceptible to the pass. While every other offense in the NFL,
I don't know if anyone has told them this yet, but passing is actually more efficient than running the ball. So you're better off being better at stopping the pass than stopping the run. Mike Vrabel, if you're out there,
it's amazing.
Oh, Vrabes.
But so we get
it doesn't matter. It's like they're in a
Chargers.
division with Jacksonville, Indy, and Houston. It's not like they're gonna. I mean, if they do, wow, I guess Jacksonville
could
games.
force this. They're 2 games behind, and they have to play each other going one more time in Week 18. I'm kind of keeping an eye on that division race.
Oh, that's a great point. I didn't realize
they could have to play each other again.
Oh wow, Jacksonville actually has a much better point differential as well. They could Tennessee could easily whittle this whole lead away just by running the ball. Unbelievable. I want this to happen so badly. I want this team to be held accountable.
Yes. Well, and so where I think it starts is this week. Now, it is interesting because obviously Derrick Henry has a pretty good matchup against the old Chargers, paper thin run defense. The Chargers, however, have just as good of a matchup through the air. And as Dario said, I think if I'm going to lean into something, I would like it to be a really effective passing game. And so the Titans are going to be pushed here 100%, just like last week. I think Derrick Henry is going to be successful, but how successful is he going to be, at 8K in DFS? And if they are getting shredded on the other side, Dontrell Hilliard is out. He suffered a neck injury last week and was ruled out pretty quick for this week. So theoretically, maybe that puts Derrick Henry with some more pass catching volume. It's an interesting game because I just really expect the Chargers to shred through the air. And Mike Williams is really cheap and not that popular. You guys got to talk me through this one. How are you approaching it, Dario?
Yeah, I think this is the cheapest that stacking Justin Herbert with Mike Williams and Keenan Allen will maybe ever be. Like, I think this is kind of like my highlighted play of the week in the First Mover show that I do on Mondays. And I just think that, like you said, Mike Williams, he's fully back. He crushed last week. And I'm also surprised that he's only at 12% at 6,300. I mean, that is just criminally low against this defense too. It would be one thing if they had a tough matchup, but everything's lining up for Justin Herbert to just light the Titans defense up with Williams and Keenan Allen. So I think this is my favorite play of the week, is to stack the Chargers. And obviously it's never going to be the cheapest stack, but I think onslaughting that passing game, you can include Eckler or Everett in that too. I think is absolutely my favorite play of the week.
What do you think, Matt?
I mean, God. Yeah, let's go. Herbert, baby. Herbert with these weapons. It's amazing, right? It's amazing when you have your weapons. Like Jalen Hurts, he has Smith and has Brown healthy. He's smashing. Right? This is what happens. So he gets the weapons back healthy, and now we have this Tennessee matchup. It's almost too good to be true. So sure, I'm happy to see Jalen Hurts get the max ownership. He deserves it. You're goddamn right he does. That's a man right there. But I'm also happy to play more Herbert than anyone else this week.
I love it. Are you just really focusing in on Mike Williams, Dario, or are you gonna sprinkle some Keenan? Josh Palmer's probably a little too expensive for those guys being back. And I know you mentioned Everett, but I was just curious about kind of Keenan and Mike, because I just can never really click Keenan Allen. Maybe that's a leak. I don't know, but it's just hard for me to not just stick with Mike Williams here. So,
Eric, Keenan Allen has had 14 targets in each of the last 2 games. That's pretty good.
Pretty good.
It's widely known. So
you got to play him, man.
God damn it! Here comes the first 40-point Keenan Allen game in years when I don't play him.
You got to play him. You can't
come back with
you can't fade him, man. Do not fade him.
So are you? I think I just want him in doubles. How are you kind of approaching the Herbert?
Yeah, I think that basically like I would mix and match between like Williams, Eckler, Allen, and Everett, probably in that order. Like, I think because Eckler is only like 8% projected ownership, Eckler's going to get his 10 targets. Like, I think there's going to be a lot of, like, my favorite double stack is probably Eckler and Williams, get the deep threat and the long, like the big touchdown threat in Mike Williams, and then Austin Eckler's like 12 underneath targets. I think there's probably a world where I'll build some triple stack lineups with Allen, Williams, and Eckler, and then, just like punt plays everywhere else. I do think that, I just talked about this when we mentioned Chig while we were talking about the last game, but I think that when you look at ownership, it makes a lot of sense to pivot to Hooper. Like, he could just as easily get the touchdown. He gets the red zone targets. He's running as many or more routes most weeks. I think that given the disparity in ownership, I think you probably pivot to Hooper, pay the extra. No, he's cheaper too. Because
$100.
Yeah, I was going to say
cheaper.
I get it, guys. We're talking about like a full blown tight end committee in 2022. Oh my God. The state of this tight end position, I can't do it. I can't go Hooper, you guys. I'm out. Okay. I am out. I'd rather go Cameron Braid or something. You guys want to go Hooper?
Oh God.
This is what we're talking about when you guys are doing Otten versus Braid. It's so bad.
We gotta change the conversation.
This is terrible.
Hooper versus
Meanwhile,
Cameron
what
Braid.
I think is interesting. Yeah, I'll do you a favor. Okay. So what's interesting is you've got Everett sandwiched between Schultz and Kmet and Ingram. It's perfect. It's perfect. His price is up enough, 4.3K, where you're just going to get a lot of people not playing him because like, hey, it doesn't work as well. I got like double stack with the wide receivers. Then I have my Ecklers and
in a vacuum, I absolutely love Everett.
Baby. I think that's the story here at tight end. Is like we have plenty of choices this week at tight end. You have Okonkwo, you can play him a little bit, though he is so chalky. The chalk might come down on him. That's hard for me to believe. I don't know. I'm still probably gonna play some. I don't know.
He was real chalky at 2,700 last week. Now it's a 400, but then he paid everybody off. So
yeah,
he's not.
Hunter Henry's out there. Sure. There's just options, right?
Yep.
There's options. You got Dulcich against Arizona, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah. So there's this price zone, and there's a lot of options. I don't think you need to worry about Tennessee, and I'm not. But you're right. It's a bit tricky in terms of.
Yeah, I think it's
rarely play a non-mobile quarterback without a run back. That does not seem like a good idea. I feel like we got to find somebody. I don't dumpster diving for Austin Hooper, I think, is a mistake.
I think
so. What do we like on the Titans?
The world where you play a Derrick Henry run back is probably where you stack Herbert with maybe like Williams and Everett and just get like the cheapest options on Herbert, play Henry on the way back. Cause I can't get very excited for Robert Woods and Nick Westbrook-Akine. I don't know about you guys.
I think I got to go Westbrook-Akine.
Oh, geez.
What?
I just, the names we've been discussing on this here show is an encyclopedia of
dude. When Burks is out, he gets 8 targets and scores touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have that much of an issue. No,
it's what he does. So I think that's more of a move than Hooper. I'll say that. I can't believe this is a conversation. But yes, I'm going to put my thumb on the scale and I'm going to say I'd rather play Westbrook-Akine than Austin Hooper.
I just think we've already seen Westbrook-Akine's best, which is that game where he had 2 miraculous long touchdowns. Mm-hmm. Maybe you're just praying for one of those to happen again, but it's just not very exciting on the Titans run back side as a whole.
Yeah, I think
that it's fine to play him. My larger point is I want some Everett, baby. Right? I'm all about point chasing both Ingram and what Ingram did last week.
Yeah.
Because that's where I see some edge here in terms of this particular stack.
And I think that it's pretty remarkable that Everett got 8 targets last week when all the Chargers weapons are still healthy, which we hadn't seen since week one. Week one, Everett had 4 targets.
And you're asking Eckler at 8.5K to do it all in the receiving game, which he has done and can do, I don't have a strong case for Eckler this week.
No, I definitely prefer Everett. And frankly, to be totally honest, and this is also not a me thing. Like you said, Gallup is definitely a me kind of a play. Derrick Henry is never a me kind of a play, but I would forego Eckler in lieu of Henry as your bring back if you are adamant about having a bring back from the Titans so how I would build the lineup would probably be Herbert, Mike Williams, Gerald Everett with Derrick Henry at running back. I think would be my favorite way.
A full Eckler fade is absolutely fine.
I think so. We've already outlined a lot of running backs, right?
It's just Pacheco, with that front seven, it's Pollard. hard to think of a scenario where against the Titans, Eckler's the guy that's burning you.
Right, because it has to all come through the touchdowns, but the yards got to come through the air, and it's just tough at 8,500.
Yeah, I don't see it. A lot of times he's going to score a touchdown from the 8-yard line or something on the ground. He's not able to. That Titans don't allow that shit. It's not happening.
They just let you throw easily.
Yeah, I mean that's just not a thing you see against them. So now we're and he's been remember most of Eckler's production this year has been with one of those two receivers hurt or out.
Right.
So and now we're saying, well, he needs to get there mostly through the air with a healthy Allen, a healthy Williams, and Everett underrated. Bless you, Dario.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't hit the mute.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah. So I'm all aboard. So Eckler's ownership's not high, but it's probably going to be around 6, 7, 8%.
Yeah.
So there's you could just make all those guys are dead.
Yeah. The rake is theoretically paid there. Yeah. I just like some of these other backs.
Yeah.
We talked about Derrick Henry
without fading Eckler. Pay your rake. Love you, Eckler. Austin Eckler. Love you. Great personality. Awesome work ethic. Super skilled player. Love you. Not playing you this week.
Let's hit really quickly our last game on our list, Bengals Bucs, which is probably, I can't believe we're saying this also in 2022 that the Bucs games are very difficult because you never want to play any Bucs. But their defense is getting more and more banged up. They're losing secondary pieces. Vita Vea is out. It's becoming a little bit of a shit show for the Bucs. If their division wasn't so bad, we might be talking about shutdown season for some of these Bucs guys here down the stretch. But they're fighting for the playoffs, and they get a Bengals team who looks to be getting T. Higgins back. Tyler Boyd is questionable. Hayden Hurst is still out, but it looks like T is going to play. That's not a guarantee, but he fully practiced today. What, Dario, are you focusing in on other? You can talk about Jamar Chase, but is it really kind of just we're just riding Chase right now, or overall Bengals stacks are just enticing to you, or just kind of what's your thoughts on the Bengals?
Yeah, I mean I think it's so hard with T. Higgins after what we saw last week. I'm surprised. Looks like his ownership projects for about 6%. I'm surprised it's even that high because I would think no one can trust him right now. Yeah. He ran one route.
Which apparently, did you hear this story? They didn't say when he got hurt, so we don't really know that. I would assume in pregame or something, because they decided he wasn't going to play, despite he wasn't being on the injury report. He snuck onto the field without his coach's permission for that one snap, and that's what they caught him and yanked him back out. So he wasn't even going to play that one snap last week.
Was that for his contract or something? Why did he do that?
I don't know. He's an idiot.
Is that a bonus thing?
I don't know.
No, I mean, he's still on his rookie contract. I would imagine he doesn't have any weird
well, that's what I'm saying. That doesn't make sense.
He just wanted to play, be out there with the dudes.
He's that hungry? Oh my God, I got to play him this week.
Well, would you want to stand on the sideline and watch Trenton Irwin play for 3 hours?
No, I wouldn't. But I think we all have been listening to enough podcasts and hearing analysis on Chase being a league winner in fantasy football in the fantasy playoffs. That also applies to DFS.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're going to want to play a lot of Chase this week, a lot.
Mm-hmm.
A lot. I don't know what a lot is too much for a lot of people. But I'm looking at the ownership right here. Chris Cimino has him as only the 5th most owned at 16.3%. The chase rule, which we've established week in last few weeks, add 10, whatever that is, right? Remember that?
Uh-huh.
I think we said, was it Zay Jones or someone else? We said someone was at 25%. We said at most 15. No, that wasn't Zay. Zay was
I
at
think
0.
it was Amon-Ra, maybe.
Amon-Ra. That's what it
Amon-Ra.
was. That's what it was. Okay,
Yeah.
so yeah, that was what Zay 0. Okay, Z is for 0. When he's rostered highly. And then when we flipped the script, we said it was 15 Chase, 25% ownership on Amon-Ra. We said flip it and go 15-25. So yeah, I think Jamar Chase floor in your portfolio 25%.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, the Bucs secondary is banged up. Jamel Dean was ruled out today. They have, I think, multiple guys on the IR. I'll pull up their injury report.
Antoine Winfield is questionable, but I'm not sure that he's going to play either. Yeah, it's kind of a disaster. The Bucs are kind of a
Brady
disaster.
threw his life away for this.
Yeah. Yes, he did. It's bad, but I think
epic miscalculation there.
I think it's mostly, this game is somewhat straightforward. I'm not saying you can't play a Mixon or a Higgins or whatever. I think that's a little bit of personal preference, but it really is just screams Jamar Chase. Everything that Matt said and Dario has said for weeks about Jamar Chase just feels like the smash in this game, particularly on the Bengals side. But can we get anything from the Bucs side, or are we kind of just like Jamar Chase or bust? Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, we talked about how kind of bad everything's been, but you know, passing volume is going to be passing volume. They're going to throw. They're going to have to throw. Can we get any Evans, Godwin, etc. in our lineups?
I think that Mike Hilton, I'm pretty sure, is the slot corner for the Bengals, and he's been ruled out. He's, pretty good player and a key part of their secondary. I think that Chris Godwin is the one guy who I'd be open to playing. I haven't checked the ownership on him yet this week because I feel like he's always one of those guys who projects pretty highly.
Yeah,
he's about 12%. Not, I would like that to be a little bit lower. I think you'd probably play a little bit less than that of Godwin, but I think that he's been Brady's go-to target lately. Like we said, Mike Evans has face planted the last few weeks. I think that that's the way to go. I mean, look at these are Chris Godwin's target shares or target per game since week 6: 12, 13, 11, 10, 8, 13, 13, 9. So you can pencil him in for at least 9 targets. And with the Bengals missing their slot cornerback, I think that could be just enough to be the run back you want.
Godwin's going to have a week, baby. He's going to have a week. This feels like this is this is strikingly similar to the Michael Gallup situation. And imagine Michael Gallup, but really good.
Yeah, like a star, a legitimate star.
Yeah, if Michael Gallup was really good, he'd be Chris Godwin, and he'd be instead of getting 7 targets a game, he'd be getting 11. Right? Yeah, but now they're both recovering from an ACL tear. They haven't been themselves. They face the 49ers, there's all these things, and then the game comes along where everything kind of clicks into place. And here's the 15 targets. Here's the 130 yards and 2 touchdowns we were looking for from Chris Godwin.
I mean, if you take out...
Sign me up.
Once you remove his week 1 game where he only played a third of the snaps, where he hurt his hamstring because he came back a little bit too soon, the other 10 games he's played this year, on average, he's over 10 targets per game.
He's an animal.
105 targets.
Chase Godwin skinny stacks are nice.
Yeah, I like that.
I think that's the way to play this game.
Nice. I like it. How much Burrow? Are you gonna play some Burrow though too, or just focusing in on Chase?
I think it's tough to play. I mean, I think if you're gonna play Burrow, you include T, and you just hope that T Higgins is healthy enough to be himself. Because you can't really single stack Burrow. Hurst is hurt.
I think you can single stack him with Chase and just say, okay, it's the Chase explosion. Chase gets 2 or 3, and it's kind of a dabble of Trent Taylor. T can have a good game, but not pay off his price. If T were cheaper, I think I just think, and Burrow's running enough right? Only 10 yards last week, but 6 more carries, 11 before that, 9 before that. He's got a bunch of rushing touchdowns on the season. He's not Jalen Hurts, of course, but there's a little bit more juice in Burrow's legs. Now he's another year removed from the injury. I think you could play Burrow, Chase with Godwin as your only stack of this game.
It's a little thin, but I am with you.
He is 6th among quarterbacks in red zone carries and 4th in rushing touchdowns with 5 of them. So
yeah,
there's definitely some upside for Burrow in that direction.
It's a skinny main stack, which is fine, right? It's fine. It's a little bit of that. I think if you consider Hurts and Fields one quarterback, like in sort of your exposure to that game is X, and you're not going to play Brady. We're not going to play Tannehill. We're not going to play a Texans quarterback. We're not going to play. You can play, but we're not going to play Lawrence. So I think that as your 5th priority quarterback, 6th priority quarterback, depending on how you do the math there, sure. I think it's a dabble situation. But I want more Mahomes. I certainly want a lot more Herbert. I want more Dak. I'll say that.
Yep. I think that's however you I'm trying to think of where I would put him. He's maybe a little bit closer to Mahomes for me, after Hurts, after Dak, after Herbert. And so then you get to like Burrow,
Mahomes and then
right. And like you said, you
Hurts
include Fields. Fields kind of like
Fields and Burrow. I think you would have a similar ownership on.
That makes sense. I think that makes sense.
Just talking through it, there's a lot of good options on this slate. Like I think this is a slate where there's 5 or 6 quarterbacks that we want to mix in, and that's exciting for a 10-game slate.
And the interest. So a lot of the guys that we have talked about, as you see, I have it sorted by projected ownership at quarterback now: Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Dak Prescott, Justin Herbert. I think the most interesting part to me is that. I like Burrow maybe even a little bit more than these 2 guys do, but I don't even have to do that because I think Justin Herbert is all of our favorite quarterback, and he's the lowest owned out of all of those top guys. So, that was part of why I'm like, okay, Burrow at 3% or whatever, seems kind of nice, but I can get almost that same leverage with Herbert and almost with Dak, if everybody's going to play Hurts.
Yeah. And I think with Herbert, you have maybe Burrow Chase gets there, but if you play Herbert and things play out the right way, you've already got like 2 or 3 other pieces in your lineup that have smashed. So I think that there's just more weapons for Herbert at the moment.
And I mean, Herbert can score a rushing touchdown. I know he hasn't been like Burrow, but it's not like he's physically he's not
coming into the year. He was known as a more mobile quarterback.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and he's actually been, this was something every week when I'm doing our projections for Player Profiler, you kind of check on how much quarterbacks have been running the ball just to attribute them their share of the carries in an offense. And I noticed that Justin Herbert has had a very strong and steady uptick for the last 4 or 5 weeks based on, his season average. Obviously, we know he had that rib injury early on. I think he's getting back to being more himself and getting that 4, 5, 6 carries in a game as opposed to like 1 or 2 when he didn't really trust his body to run the ball.
Makes total sense. I did want to bring up Swaggy P mentions you don't always have to force a run back in your stacks, and we're definitely very big proponents of. He says skinny stacks can also get there any given week in tournaments. Trust me, probably no one says skinny stacks, maybe even more than Matt. We talk about it every single week. It's like our favorite thing.
No, he's actually Eric. He's talking about very thin.
Burrow
primary stacks. He's talking about thin primary stacks. And,
like a single
the reason
stack.
why, just so Swaggy understands, the reason why we prefer additional correlation is when those games hit that we have picked, the probability that you're going to be, getting one of these, super payout outcomes is just a lot higher. The probability that if just Burrow and Chase hit, you've then got to, like Dario laid it out perfectly, you've then got to ace more positions. So the probability that one of those particular lineups, like in the world where we're doing double stacks with Herbert and single stacks with Burrow, it's a lot harder to ace a Burrow Chase stack than it is a Herbert Mike Williams stack, for example.
Yeah,
that's all we're talking about. That's just the core benefit of correlation. And we, as a philosophy, believe in dialing up the correlation.
Totally agree. Brad says it basically what you said. What do you win when you win is what I would call, like, what do you get when you're right? And what you get when you're right by correlating within these games, the whole point of the show, and to be clear, the whole point of the show
we call it the Stack Fest for a reason.
Right.
But it is also to talk through. You'll hear us a lot of the time say, I don't want, this is Matt will say, this is a skinny stack game. I'm not playing, we're not games, right? Or we talked about the Eagles. We said on the first game, we're like, nothing says you have to play a bear. I totally agree with that premise. Every game is different. Every situation is unique. But the whole point of this show is to figure out where those outsized gains are in these.
And I would say one more thing. When you onslaught a game, for example, you're allowed to have more one-off plays. Okay, this is something we've not talked about, I don't think, yet, but it's important. When you onslaught, you're allowed to have more one-off plays. If you decide to go down this road of a thin sort of Burrow, Chase, Godwin, right? You but the probabilities suggest you're better off going ahead and doing these micro stacks or skinny stacks, whatever way you want to think about it, in the other games where you go, well, I said Dorsett Pacheco, right? You want to go full mansion on a Dorsett Pacheco, but you're going to want to do it. You're going to want to at least, you're more incentivized, almost in our philosophy, required to do that. If you're going to go light on your primary stack, you better bring in a secondary stack.
Yeah, it's there are a million ways to skin a cat. You will see good tournament teams that don't do all of these little things, but the whole premise
You'll also see teams winning $1 million with no correlation.
Yeah, that's the most frustrating.
Yeah,
it happens all the time, people.
But I like to think about it as a DFS lineup is the equivalent of a parlay. You got to hit a very, very, very long parlay. And it's not like a parlay is easier because it's just like a yes, no. You got to hit the nuts. Like you have to hit the best. It's not just like, did this guy score a touchdown, right? This isn't the same game parlay. This is like you got to hit every leg of this parlay is a really low probability event. So in order to make it easier on ourselves, we correlate those events from within that, right? If Jamar Chase hits, well, Joe Burrow probably did well, right? But then Chris Godwin has more opportunity because he's in a better situation to produce, as that example from that. The Chargers, right? Derrick Henry I mentioned Derrick Henry, instead of Austin Eckler. Derrick Henry does the Derrick Henry, rips off a couple big long runs. Now Justin Herbert's down by 14. Now you got yourself a game-winning stack, right? It wasn't necessarily about the individual plays. It was about how you constructed that lineup to get less things right. That's really, you're just trying to make it easier on yourself. That doesn't mean it has to be, right? You'll see really good players that have some kind of crazy lineups, but they always do have some form of kind of correlation. It may not be the correlation you're thinking about. They may just onslaught the Eagles, right? You can take a tournament down that way with no bear or whatever, but there are forms of correlation. That's the point. That's really what we're trying to get to here. And on that note, as we get out of here, I don't think I have normally I can almost feel like I can guess what you guys are going to say here as we sign off on the show. I'm terrified Matt's going to pick Philip Dorsett as his conviction play. But if you have not watched the show, we always sign out with kind of a conviction call. What is the one thing you need to have in tournaments? And all three of us kind of come up with our own little guess here. Let's start with Dario. What's the week 15 tournament winner?
I think for me, it's got to be the Justin Herbert to Mike Williams connection. I'm shocked it's not chalkier than it is. So hopefully I'm not jinxing that. But at this ownership, I think that's like a smash for me. Obviously, we like the Dak stacks and mega stacking the Eagles too. But I think the Chargers against the Titans, like we saw last week with Trevor Lawrence, just how susceptible this Titans pass defense is. I think the Chargers are still cheap because Mike Williams and Keenan Allen are kind of on the mend from injuries. There's just a lot of things coalescing in the right direction for Justin Herbert and Mike Williams. And then, whether it's Keenan Allen, Gerald Everett as that, extra piece in your double stack, I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a bunch of players that are finally hitting their stride post-injury, whether it be even the mild injuries that didn't cost them games, from Justin Herbert and his rushing to Michael Gallup to Chris Godwin. I think this is a big week for that. It's also a big week for just not making it complicated. Fantasy football doesn't have to be hard. When the Chiefs play the Texans and they have a workhorse back, you play that guy whether he runs a 4.37 or not. It just happens this guy runs a 4.37. So fantasy football doesn't have to be hard. You can take the no-brainer plays and enjoy them even more when they're at low ownership for unspeakable, unknown reasons. And feel free to not play chalky bad players. All these very basic things. Don't make it hard. Don't overthink it. And enjoy these players finally rounding into form. Players that we love, like Chris Godwin.
I love the rounding into form because it really does kind of encapsulate everything that we were talking about. Like you said, even like Mike Williams coming back from injury, Isaiah Pacheco rounding into form as a rookie, and my guy that I'm attaching onto here, Miles Sanders. You mentioned that you don't have to make fantasy football hard. Everybody's excited for the Eagles. No one's excited for Miles Sanders, who has 2 30-plus point games in the last 3. It's a dream. He's maybe even more so than Pacheco, taking on cannibalizing that backfield more for himself. And Matt cited all the red zone and goal line carries he's been getting. Miles Sanders just feels like an absolute stone cold smash to me. Playing with Pacheco, play your Chargers stacks, play the bleed backs on the Chiefs against the Texans and the Eagles against the Bears. That seems like a pretty good recipe to score some fantasy points to me. So tie that all together, and I think you got a pretty fun tournament lineup. And we didn't have to mention Philip Dorsett and Equinemius St. Brown, thankfully. So that'll do it here for us. RotoGrinders Player Profiler Stack Fest for week 15. We will be back, of course, in week 16, hopefully to do some victory lapping. But good luck to everybody, and we'll see you next Friday.